All right, everyone, we are back with part 10 of How to Write a Sentence. Yes, this is part 10. I believe I have numbered a few of these wrong because I can't count to 10, apparently. I teach English. I don't teach math. Anyways, I will go back and try to fix that. But this is part 10 of How to Write a Sentence. Acts and plot. These two things go together, so I thought we should just talk about these in the same video today. So today we will be looking at what is an act, and the 3-act versus 5-act stories, which you could also just call parts of a plot, planning your acts or your plot, and common mistakes in acts and plots. So what is an act? So if you remember in my last video about how to build a scene, we talked about scenes are the block of your story, and that turns into chapters as a long scene or a collection of short scenes. And after that, you have acts, which are scenes and chapters split up into 3 parts, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that creates your story or your novel, which is 3 completed acts. So acts are just a way that we break up stories, and we split them into 3 acts, usually a beginning, a middle, and an end. Aristotle is often given credit for the 3-act system, but actually he truly just came up with the distinction between beginnings, middles, and ends. And he also expanded on a whole lot of ideas in Western storytelling related to Greek theater, tragedy, and comedy. So he was the one that wrote down notes on the simple and complex plots, tragic and heroic characters, and many other notes on like diction and formation of stories that we use today in Western storytelling. According to Aristotle, the plot of a story should not be based on the whole life of a character, but on an event that happens to a character. So when we write a story, we're not writing about from their birth until their death, unless it's a biography. Normally what we're talking about is one event or one series of events that are connected together, and that creates the story. So the basics of a plot, you have the character, which is the person at the center of the story. You have the event, something that happens to the character. And you have the goal. So this event sparks a new goal in this main character, and the story is the journey of the character setting off to fulfill his goal. So what's the difference between a 3-act and a 5-act story? Well, actually not that much. So the 3-act system is just kind of the general one that we use. You have Act 1, which is the beginning. And in this act, we introduce the character and the world and the inciting incident. This is a very important novel term. The inciting incident is the major event that causes a new goal in the character. And we'll go over an example in a second. Act 2 is the middle act, and this is where the character struggles to meet their new goal. So in this act, we usually involve multiple failures and detours that the character must overcome to reach their goal. So they can't make the goal and then just automatically reach it. They have to have conflict. They have to have issues in reaching that goal. And then Act 3, the character either succeeds or fails in meeting their goal. And so this will be the ending of the story. Do they meet the goal? Do they not meet the goal? Do they die? Something like that. So now we want to talk about the 5-act system. And actually the 5-act system is just the 3-act system split up into more acts, but it's actually the same thing. So if we look at it, Act 1 is the introduction to the characters and the inciting incident. Okay, same thing. And then we have Act 2, the conflict and rising action, which is the character must overcome obstacles to reach their goal. So before that, we called that the middle. Now it's in Act 2. In Act 3, we have the climax, which is the last chance the character has to meet their goal, or you could call it the final battle. Whenever I think of Act 3, I always think final battle, final chance, something along those lines. And here's where it kind of diverts from the 3-act system. You have Act 4, which is the falling action and loose ends. So the climax has ended, the final battle has finished. Now we have to tie up all the loose ends, answer all the unanswered questions that were in the story, and then the conclusion, the last act, is the ending of the story, and it either has a hopeful, happy, or tragic note. Now, you'll see the 5-act system more in TV series. TV series have more of a falling action and conclusion after the climax. A lot of novels don't really have a whole lot of falling action, especially if you read like romance novels. They'll have the happily ever after, and then they'll have like an epilogue. So they'll have an after the fact, which I wouldn't really include that in any of the acts unless you wanted to include it in the conclusion, but it's still kind of an extra. So actually you won't see the 5 acts very often in novels. I haven't really seen it very often. It's really hard to write with novels, I've found, but that doesn't mean that people don't do it, and it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I don't pay attention to it because I prefer the 3-act system when I write books. That's what I started with. That's what I learned with. That's how I still write. If you want to use any of the other act systems, the 5-act system, or there's other ones that you can use that are so complicated that I found no use for them whatsoever. But this is just the basics, and it's a wonderful place to start. If you are a beginning writer and you don't know how to start a story, I recommend the 3-act system always. So I want to teach you how to start planning storytelling, how to plan a story using the 3-act system. And so I want to show you how you can plan your acts. So the first act, we're going to decide the inciting incident. So in your first act, what you want to do is show your character in their normal, every day-to-day life. And don't make it boring or anything like that. And don't start with things like getting up in the morning and getting dressed. That's useless to everybody. What you want to do is you want to start off with showing the character doing something that alludes to something that they value. So each character values something, and you have to show us what they value and why. Because the inciting incident is the thing that's going to threaten the thing that they value. So we see them in their day-to-day life, we see them value something, and then we see the threat of that valuable thing being taken away. Or we don't see the threat, we actually see it being taken away, and that's part of the story. And so the event that changes the character's life forever is called the point of no return. So this means that the character can't go back to their old life even if they want to. So they don't have a choice. They're forced into this journey. They're forced to meet this new goal. So we're going to decide what they value, and then we're going to decide what takes that away from them or what threatens to take that away from them, and what is the event that makes it so they can never go back to their old life. That is Act 1. Act 2, we're going to decide the different problems that your characters will face. So we're going to decide on a series of events that makes it harder and harder for your main characters to reach their new goal. So with each attempt to reach their new goal, they should fail, because the only time they should succeed would be at the end of the story. So we're going to give them some things that they need to do, and they are going to fail each time, or there's going to be conflict, there's going to be problems. It depends on what kind of genre of story you're writing. And while they're facing these conflicts, they're either going to deepen or weaken their relationships with the other characters. And that's going to affect the development of the main character themselves. So your main character should also change throughout this story. I've mentioned earlier in one of my other videos that your characters should micro-change throughout the entire story. So when you reach the end, there is character growth, and the main character has become a new person from the beginning of the story. And those are character arcs, and I will do a video in the future about character arcs, but right now we're just talking about doing acts. We're not talking about characters right now. And then Act 3, we're going to decide how the story will end. So does your character reach their goal, or do they fail? How do your characters change by the end of the story? So those are the questions you're going to ask for Act 3. So let's take an example, one of my favorite movies from childhood, Beauty and the Beast, and I'm choosing the animated version because I want to. And so we have the beginning. So the beginning of the movie, we introduce Belle in her French village, and her father goes missing. That's the inciting incident. Her father goes missing. The beginning is within Act 1, but I'm just going to break it up a little bit more because it's a little bit easier to follow if you're new to designing acts. So Act 1 is Belle finds her father is a prisoner of a cursed prince, and she offers to take her father's place as the prisoner at the cursed castle. Meanwhile, the cursed prince will be cursed forever soon if he never learns to love or be loved in return. So the inciting incident is her father goes missing, and then she finds her father. He's a prisoner, and so she offers to be the prisoner manner instead. So Belle's goal is to save her father, and then the Beast's goal is to not be cursed forever, to break this curse. And so now they both have new goals that depend on each other. And so Act 2 in the middle, the cursed staff of the castle try to help Belle and the prince fall in love, but they struggle through misunderstandings and character conflicts. So if you've watched the movie, there's a lot of different conflicts that they have. Misunderstandings, the Beast has anger problems, they don't really get along. But as time goes on, they start to understand each other and kind of meet in the middle, and then it's not really love yet, but they're starting to get there. But then we have the climax. So the prince and Belle finally become friends, but her father becomes ill looking for her to save her, and so the prince releases her, and then she's kidnapped by Gaston, and Gaston goes to kill the cursed prince. And so this is the big final finale. Do or die. The curse either is broken or the beast dies, or we don't know what'll happen. So the ending and the resolution is the cursed prince is stabbed, and then Gaston dies, and right before the prince dies, Belle declares her love for him, and the curse is broken, and the prince is restored, and that's the ending and the resolution. And don't call spoilers in the comments, because you legitimately had forever to watch this movie. So as you can see, this is the basics of how a 3-act system will work. Again, the beginning will go within the first act and the ending will go within the third act, but I split them up just so you can see how they work out a little bit easier. And this is how you'll want to plan your own acts in the future. So let's look at some common mistakes when planning acts. There are a few. One is no risk of loss. So it's not enough to give a character a goal. You also have to give them a penalty if they do not reach their goal. They have to lose something valuable. And the conflicts throughout the acts should make even more of a risk and more of a risk and more of a risk and a bigger loss and a bigger loss and a bigger loss. This is what creates the conflict and the tension within the story. No tension, no story. And the next problem is too short of a climax. So your entire story is building to the third act. And so you want to make sure that the final act is a decent length. You don't want the final conflict to be solved too quickly. I have done this in my own stories where I've built up the entire story to a final battle, and then the final battle is only like one chapter, and I've realized throughout my writing career that it needs to be a full act, like the whole climax needs to be most of the third act. It's very important because this is the payoff for your readers. They want this epic battle, they want this final showdown, they want this moment of tension. That's what makes the ending so satisfying. And number 3, no character change. The character should be an improved or degraded person by the end of the story. The character arc is a central part of the plot. The main character, or the characters even, all need to change somehow. They can become better, improved, heroic people, or they can become degraded, tragic, more evil people. It's really up to you. My favorite book of all time will always be The Picture of Dorian Gray. It's an amazing story, and I just love that kind of gothic style of literature because the main characters struggle so much with the good and evil within themselves, and Dorian Gray is a negative character arc, so he becomes worse and worse and worse. And by the end of the story, he's just the most disgusting person you can think of. And that's what makes part of the story so epic. So he changes for the worst. A lot of characters change for the better. It's up to you. It depends on the style of your story. It depends on the genre. It depends on the mood. But your character needs to change. And then the last mistake is forced or weak endings. So you have given your readers this entire story to read. It needs to pay off. It needs to hit them in the feels as much as possible in a satisfying way. So your ending needs to invoke strong emotions in your readers. It should give readers a strong sense of hope or peace or sorrow and pain. They've invested time in the story, and the ending is the payoff. So let's do a quick recap. I know this was kind of a short lesson, but I've actually split up this lesson. I've done this video about plot and acts, so we went over the acts system, and then in my next video I will talk about how to write your first story. I wanted to split it up and not give you too much information at one time. So let's recap. Alright, so first we talked about acts. So a story is divided into 3 acts. The first act is the introduction and inciting incident, and then Act 2 is the conflict and rising action, and Act 3 is the climax and resolution. And then we talked about planning your acts. So when planning acts and plot, you have to decide who the characters are. You have to create the inciting incident, which gives the characters a new goal. Then after that, you give them challenges and impossibilities in meeting that goal. and then you decide if they succeed and fail at that goal at the end. And the last problem is common mistakes. There's no risks, short climax, no character change, and forced or weak endings. And so, if you want more help or more practice planning out plots and acts, I've actually created a workbook. There are lots of pages of tips and exercises to practice this more. Practice doing the 3-act system, and there's also a 14-day writing challenge that'll just improve your creative writing. Make sure to go back and look at lessons 1 through 9. I've gone over everything from building a sentence to using strong vocabulary to building dialogue to choosing your point of view, and you can use all of these things together to create your first story, which we will talk about in the next video, how to create your first story. These videos, all parts 1 through 10, are the building blocks to building your first story. They're great for beginners, or if you're an ESL writer, if English is not your first language. Go ahead and look through those. They all have workbooks as well. All of my workbooks are free. You can just download them at the link in the description. You don't have to pay for anything. Don't worry about it. Just go ahead and download them. You can print them out and use them, or you can put them on your tablet and use them that way. But they're just a good way to get started in writing if you want to write your stories. If you have any questions about acts or plots or Aristotle, because I'm a total nerd, go ahead and leave them in the comments and I will get back to you. If this was helpful, give it a like. And go ahead and subscribe if you want to see the next video or more videos on how to improve your writing. In the meantime, keep staying beautiful beasts. I will see you tigers later. Peace.